Ex-husband cornered the ex-wife at the gallery preview until an unsigned canvas revealed his hidden past. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Daniel Anderson stood in the grand gallery, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd as his fingers brushed the edge of a velvet rope, keeping him anchored to his thoughts. The venue was buzzing with excitement, but for Daniel, it felt like time had stopped. His life was unfolding in front of him in a series of bright, vivid colors, but none of them were as striking as the sight of her. Emily Parker. She had just entered the gallery, her presence as undeniable as the silence that followed her. Her dark hair cascaded down her shoulders in waves, and her expression was one of both curiosity and apprehension. It had been years since they'd seen each other, but in that moment, it felt like no time had passed. He had worked hard to bury his past, to move forward from their failed marriage, but seeing her again, the woman who once shared his life, was like a door opening to everything he had left behind. Emily walked through the room, her gaze flickering over the art pieces, but she hadn't noticed him yet. Daniel could feel the tension building within him, his chest tightening with every step she took. The memories, once carefully tucked away, began to resurface. She was still beautiful, still the woman he had once loved, but he knew that seeing her here, in this gallery, was more than just a coincidence. It was fate, or perhaps it was a reckoning. He had to speak to her, had to explain, but words seemed to evade him. His hands, once so steady, were now trembling slightly. She was making her way towards the section of the gallery where his paintings were displayed, and that was where it would happen. Daniel's heart raced as he watched her approach. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when his hidden past would resurface. He took a deep breath and moved toward her, his steps measured and deliberate. As he neared her, he felt the familiar pang of guilt twist in his gut. He had kept so many secrets from her. She was about to find out the truth, and there was no turning back. "Emily," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. She turned toward him, her eyes locking onto his with a mix of surprise and suspicion. She hadn't expected him to be here, and from the look on her face, she wasn't sure if she wanted to confront him. "Daniel," she replied coolly, her tone betraying none of the emotions she must have been feeling. "What are you doing here?" He wanted to tell her the truth, to explain everything, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he nodded toward the painting she was now studying. "That's mine," he said simply, hoping to break the ice, to give himself a moment to collect his thoughts. Emily glanced at the painting, her brow furrowing. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice soft but skeptical. "But I don't remember you ever painting like this." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment that everything would change. Emily was about to learn something she never expected. He could already feel the walls closing in, the weight of his secret pressing down on him. He took another step closer to her, preparing to face the consequences of the past. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. The moment had arrived, and the weight of what he was about to reveal hung heavy in the air. Emily had just commented on his painting, but her eyes had not yet grasped the truth behind it. His past, his secret life, was hidden within those brushstrokes, and soon, she would uncover it. He could feel her gaze still on him, searching for answers. He had always known this moment would come, but he wasn't ready. He wasn't sure if anyone could ever be ready to face the consequences of their past mistakes. Emily finally broke the silence. "You've really changed, Daniel," she said, her voice laced with curiosity and a hint of skepticism. "I don't even recognize the man you are now." He swallowed hard. The man she once knew had been a different person entirely, and that man had been buried beneath layers of guilt and regret. Daniel had worked tirelessly to build a new life, far removed from the man who had failed her. He had hoped that time would erase the past, but now, standing in front of her, he realized how foolish that hope had been. He couldn't escape who he had been. Not now. Not in front of her. "I didn't want you to find out like this," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily's expression softened for a moment, her eyes searching his face, as though trying to piece together the puzzle of his words. "Find out what, Daniel?" she asked, her tone gentle but filled with a mix of suspicion and concern. Daniel hesitated. How could he tell her? How could he explain the mistakes he had made without risking everything they had once shared? He wanted to protect her from the truth, but in that moment he knew there was no way around it. She deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "That painting," he said, gesturing toward the canvas. "It's not just a piece of art. It's a reminder of something I tried to forget. Something I thought I could leave behind." Emily's brow furrowed. "A reminder of what?" she asked, her voice rising with the tension in the room. Daniel glanced at the painting again, his eyes tracing the lines and colors as if they held the answers to his past. He could feel the weight of his secret pressing on him, but he knew he couldn't keep hiding. "Before I met you," Daniel began, his voice trembling slightly, "I was involved in something I never told you about. Something I regret every single day." Emily's eyes widened, and she took a step back. She didn't say anything, but the look on her face said everything. The walls she had carefully built around herself were beginning to crack, and the vulnerability she had hidden so well was starting to show. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel could barely bring himself to speak the words. "I was part of a group," he continued, his eyes dropping to the floor, ashamed to meet her gaze. "A group. Well, it wasn't a good group. They did things that weren't legal. Things that I never should have been involved in. But I was young, and I got caught up in it. I thought I could walk away, but I couldn't." Emily stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. The silence between them was deafening. Daniel could feel her shock and disbelief, but he knew it was nothing compared to the shame he carried with him every day. "You were involved in something illegal?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded slowly, the weight of his confession settling in. "I didn't want you to know, Emily," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I thought I could protect you from it. I thought I could keep it buried forever, but now it's out in the open. And I don't know what to do." The room seemed to grow colder, the space between them feeling wider with every word he spoke. Emily's eyes were filled with a mixture of hurt and confusion, and Daniel knew he had just shattered everything they had built. But in that moment, he also knew there was no turning back. The truth had been revealed, and there was no hiding from it any longer. The room was thick with silence, the kind of silence that settles over you when you realize there is no going back. Emily stood there, frozen, trying to digest what Daniel had just told her. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, and for a moment neither of them moved. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she could feel her breath catching in her throat. She had known there was something off about him, something hidden deep within, but she never imagined it would be this. "You were involved in something illegal?" she repeated, her voice a whisper, as if the words themselves were too much to bear. Daniel nodded slowly, unable to meet her eyes. The guilt was written all over his face, and Emily could feel the enormity of the truth crashing over her. It wasn't just about the secrets he had kept from her. It was about the person he had become, and the life he had left behind. She had spent years trying to move on from their failed marriage, but now, with just a few words, everything she thought she knew about him was being torn apart. "I didn't want you to find out like this," Daniel continued, his voice barely audible. "I thought I could protect you from it. I thought I could keep it buried forever." Emily's mind was racing, trying to process everything. How could she have been so blind? She had loved him once, trusted him with everything, but now, it felt as if that trust had been shattered beyond repair. She had always known there was more to his story, but this? This was a betrayal she wasn't sure she could ever forgive. "So, all this time, all those years we were together," Emily began, her voice trembling. "You were hiding this from me?" Daniel's face twisted in pain, and he took a tentative step toward her. "I never wanted you to know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted you to be a part of that world. I thought if I could just get away from it, if I could just build a new life, you'd never have to know the truth." Emily took a step back, her arms crossing over her chest in a protective gesture. The air between them was thick with unresolved tension. "And you thought that would work? You thought you could just erase all of it, like it never happened?" she asked, her voice rising. "I don't know what I thought," Daniel replied, his words filled with regret. "I was young, I was stupid. I thought I could outrun it. But the truth always catches up with you, Emily. Always." Emily shook her head, her mind struggling to reconcile the man standing before her with the person she had once loved. The person she had built a life with. She had always seen him as her protector, her partner, but now she wasn't sure who he was anymore. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Daniel's heart dropped at her words. The pain of her rejection hit him like a physical blow, but he knew she was right. He had broken the trust they had built together. He had lied to her, kept secrets, and now the consequences were unraveling before his eyes. "Emily, please," he pleaded, stepping closer to her. "I know I've made mistakes. I know. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for a chance. A chance to make things right." Emily didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, her back stiff, her eyes looking anywhere but at him. She didn't know what to say, didn't know if she could forgive him for what he had done. But a part of her wanted to believe him. A part of her still remembered the man she had married, the man who had once made her feel safe. "I don't know, Daniel," she said after a long pause, her voice soft but firm. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." The words stung, but Daniel understood. He had betrayed her trust in the worst way possible, and he couldn't undo what he had done. The silence between them was deafening as they stood there, two people who had once been everything to each other, now strangers bound together by a painful past that neither of them knew how to escape. The silence between them felt unbearable. Daniel's heart was still pounding in his chest, his mind racing, but Emily stood there, her face unreadable, her thoughts clearly miles away. He could tell that she was processing everything, trying to piece together the broken parts of the story he had just revealed. And with every passing second, he felt more like a stranger to her. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice soft and pleading. "But I know I have, and there's nothing I can do to take that back." Emily didn't respond at first, her gaze fixed on the floor. Daniel waited, hoping for a sign, some indication that she might be willing to hear him out. He knew he had shattered her trust, but he still held on to the faint hope that there could be a way forward. She finally looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and disbelief. "You were so different back then, Daniel," she said quietly. "I thought you had left all of that behind." "I thought so too," Daniel replied, his voice thick with regret. "I thought I could just move on. But some things, they follow you. And sometimes, no matter how hard you try to escape, they come back when you least expect it." Emily's eyes filled with a brief flash of anger, and she took a step closer to him. "And you thought I could just forget? You thought you could just bury it all and I would never have to know?" Her words stung, but they were the truth. He had thought he could outrun his past, hide it from her, from everyone. But now, standing in front of her, he saw the damage he had done, the way his actions had torn their relationship apart. "I didn't want to hurt you," Daniel said again, his voice cracking. "I was trying to protect you. I thought if you never knew you'd be safe. But I was wrong." Emily's face softened, but her eyes were still filled with doubt. She stepped back, as if the distance between them was necessary for her to think. "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can even look at you the same way. Daniel's chest tightened at her words, but he knew she was right. He had broken something that might never be fixed. I understand, he said quietly. I'll give you all the time you need. But I need you to know. I'm sorry. I never wanted to drag you into this. I never wanted to hurt you. Emily nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak for a long time, and Daniel was left standing there, the weight of his past crushing him. He had done something unforgivable, and now, he wasn't sure if there was any way to make it right. I need to go, Emily finally said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She turned away, her footsteps echoing in the quiet gallery as she walked toward the exit. Daniel stood there, rooted to the spot, his heart heavy with the realization that he might have lost her forever. As the sound of her footsteps faded into the distance, he closed his eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. He had never imagined that seeing Emily again would end like this, that his past would come back to haunt him in such a cruel way. And yet, here he was, facing the consequences of the choices he had made. He knew it was too late to fix everything, but he also knew that he couldn't run from the past any longer. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Daniel stood alone in the quiet gallery, the sound of Emily's footsteps fading into the distance, leaving him in a hollow silence. His body felt heavy, as if the weight of his past, which he had tried so hard to bury, was finally catching up with him. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the sting of regret course through him like an electric shock. Every choice he had made, every lie he told, had led to this moment, and now, he wasn't sure if there was any way to make amends. He knew he had broken something precious, something that might never be fixed. The painting that had started it all stood before him, its colors vibrant and full of life, but to him, it felt like a symbol of everything that was wrong in his life. The truth he had tried to hide for so long was now out in the open, and there was no escaping it. He thought back to when he first met Emily, how everything had seemed perfect. They had been so young, so full of dreams. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. He had changed. He had fallen into a world that was dangerous, a world where he thought he could find power, respect, and a place for himself. But in doing so, he had lost the one thing that mattered most, her. He had always tried to protect her from the darker side of his life, thinking that keeping his secrets would keep her safe. But in the end, his lies had hurt her more than the truth ever could. He had made the ultimate mistake by keeping her in the dark, by thinking that he could carry the weight of his past without it affecting their future. He knew now that the truth was far more powerful than any secret he could have hidden. And now that Emily knew, he couldn't take it back. His chest tightened as he thought about her leaving, about the look in her eyes when she had said she didn't know if she could ever trust him again. The pain of her words cut deeper than any physical wound he had ever endured. He had betrayed her, and that betrayal was something that couldn't be undone. He wanted to call after her, to beg her to stay, but he knew he had to let her go. She needed space. She needed time to process everything, to decide if there was even a possibility of forgiveness. And he had to respect that. Daniel turned and walked away from the painting, his footsteps heavy as they echoed through the empty gallery. It felt as though the entire world had shifted beneath him, and he wasn't sure where he stood anymore. He had lost Emily once before, and now it felt as though he had lost her all over again. His heart ached with the realization that he might never be able to earn back her trust, that the woman he had once loved so deeply might never look at him the same way again. The truth had destroyed everything he had worked so hard to rebuild. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Daniel couldn't help but wonder if he had ruined everything for good. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain, he couldn't change the past. And that, more than anything else, terrified him. Daniel spent the next few days lost in thought, unable to shake the weight of what had happened. He had given Emily space, knowing that any attempt to rush her would only push her further away. But the silence was deafening. Every minute without hearing from her felt like an eternity. He replayed the conversation over and over in his mind, wishing he could take back the words that had caused so much damage. He hadn't meant for any of it to happen. The past he had tried so desperately to bury was now front and center, and there was no escaping it. As he sat in his apartment, staring at the blank walls, he realized how much he had taken for granted. Emily had been his anchor, his reason for wanting to be a better man. And now, he wasn't sure if he could ever win back the trust he had lost. The phone on his desk buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a text message from Emily. His heart skipped a beat as he opened it. "We need to talk." That was all it said. Daniel stared at the words, unsure of how to respond. He knew this conversation would be crucial, perhaps the most important one of his life. He had no idea what Emily wanted to say, but he couldn't help the hope that flickered inside him. Maybe this was his chance to explain, to show her that he had changed. He didn't know if she would ever be able to forgive him, but he had to try. He quickly typed a reply, his fingers trembling as he typed. "I'll meet you wherever you want. I'm ready to listen." He hit send, then immediately regretted it. What if she had already made up her mind? What if this was the final nail in the coffin? The thought of losing her for good sent a pang of panic through him, but he pushed it aside. He couldn't worry about that right now. All he could do was show her that he was serious about making things right. The minutes felt like hours as he waited for her reply. Finally, his phone buzzed again. "Let's meet at the park. Tomorrow at noon." Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The park. It was a place they used to visit together, back when everything felt simple and easy. It had been their escape from the world, a place where they could just be themselves. The memories came flooding back, and for a moment, he allowed himself to feel hopeful. Tomorrow would be their chance. He couldn't control how Emily would feel or what she would say, but he knew that he had to face whatever was coming. The next day, Daniel arrived at the park early, his nerves on edge. He paced back and forth, the anticipation building with every passing minute. He had no idea what Emily wanted, but he was determined to listen, to give her the space she needed to say whatever was on her mind. He looked up as he saw her walking toward him, her steps slow but steady. She had a guarded look on her face, and Daniel could see the uncertainty in her eyes. It hurt to see her like this, but he knew he had no one to blame but himself. "Emily," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for meeting me." She nodded, her eyes not quite meeting his. "I don't know how to begin," she said, her voice shaky. "I've been thinking a lot about everything you said, and about everything that happened between us." Daniel held his breath, waiting for her to continue. This was the moment. The moment that could change everything. He wanted to beg her for another chance, but he knew that wasn't the right way to approach it. This had to be about her. "I need you to understand something," Emily continued, her voice growing stronger. "I'm not angry with you, Daniel. I'm hurt. Deeply hurt. But I also know that I can't change what happened. What I can change is whether or not I can trust you again." Her words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on him. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. "I know I've hurt you, and I can't take that back. But I want you to know that I'm committed to being better. I'm not asking for forgiveness right now, but I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be the person you deserve." Emily's gaze softened slightly, but she still looked unsure. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Daniel," she said quietly. "But I'm willing to take things one step at a time. No promises. But I'm willing to try." Daniel's heart soared at her words, though he knew it wasn't a guarantee. It was a small victory, but it was enough for him to hold on to. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll do whatever it takes." As they stood there, in the park where they had once shared so many happy moments, Daniel realized that their journey was far from over. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. The road to redemption had just begun. Daniel's heart raced with every step he took toward Emily. It had been a few weeks since their conversation at the park, and while there was no clear resolution, they had started to rebuild a fragile connection. She had agreed to meet with him again today, and this time, it felt different. It felt like a turning point. He had spent the past few days reflecting on everything, the mistakes, the regrets, the painful truth that had come to light. And with each passing day, he realized just how much he had taken Emily for granted. He hadn't truly understood how deeply his actions had hurt her until he saw the hurt in her eyes that day. Now, he was determined to do whatever it took to make things right. As he walked into the cafe where they had agreed to meet, he saw her sitting at a table by the window. She was looking down at her phone, her expression unreadable. Her hair, which she had always kept tied up when they were together, was loose now, cascading down her shoulders in soft waves. She looked up as he approached, her face softening slightly, though there was still a trace of caution in her eyes. "Hey," Daniel said, his voice tentative. "Hey," Emily replied, giving him a small smile. There was something different in the way she looked at him now. It wasn't the warmth he had once known, but it wasn't the coldness either. It was something more guarded, like she was still figuring out where to place him in her life. "How have you been?" she asked, her voice gentle, but there was a hint of hesitation in her tone. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About you. About us." Emily nodded, her gaze softening just slightly. "I've been doing the same," she said. There was a long pause between them, neither of them knowing exactly how to continue. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I know I've hurt you, Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I know it's not going to be easy for you to trust me again. But I want you to know that I'm willing to work for it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Emily looked down for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I also need to be honest with you, Daniel. I don't know if I can ever completely trust you again." Her words hit him like a punch in the gut, but he knew they were the truth. He had to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful it was. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I'm not asking for you to forgive me right away. All I'm asking for is a chance to show you that I can be better. That I can be the person you deserve." Emily's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, he saw a flicker of something like hope. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by uncertainty. "I want to believe you," she said, her voice tinged with doubt. "But I can't just forget everything that happened. And I can't pretend like it didn't change me. It changed everything." Daniel nodded, knowing that nothing he said could erase the past. The damage had been done, and now it was up to them to figure out if there was any way forward. "I don't expect you to forget," he said softly. "But I hope that, with time, we can find a way to move forward. Together or apart, I just want to know that I tried." Emily's expression softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his. "I don't know what the future holds, Daniel," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I'm willing to try, too. I don't know if it will work, but I'm willing to see where it goes." Daniel's heart lifted at her words, and though he knew there was still so much work to be done, it felt like a small step in the right direction. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "That means everything to me." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them lost in their thoughts, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a silence that felt like the beginning of something new, something fragile but worth fighting for. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Daniel found himself both relieved and anxious. The conversations with Emily, though small and cautious, had slowly started to stitch together the fragments of their fractured relationship. They met often, but each time, the silence between them spoke louder than any words could. Emily was still cautious, still hesitant, and Daniel understood. He didn't deserve immediate trust. He had spent so many years trying to outrun his past, but now he had no choice but to face it, along with the consequences that came with it. It was not easy. Every time he saw her, the weight of everything he had done was palpable. He wanted to apologize again, to explain more, but he knew he had to give her space. He had to let her make her own decisions without trying to rush her. One afternoon, they sat together in a park, the same place where they had first started to reconnect. The air was warm, and the leaves on the trees rustled gently in the breeze. Daniel could see the tension in Emily's shoulders, the way she avoided looking directly at him. He wasn't sure if she was thinking about their past or if she was still unsure about the future, but he felt it, her uncertainty. It hung in the air like a thick fog. "I've been thinking," Emily said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, and Daniel could tell that she had something important to say. He looked at her, his heart pounding, waiting for her to continue. "About us. About what we've been through." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I can't pretend like everything is fine. I can't just forget what happened." Daniel nodded, not speaking, giving her the space to continue. He had heard those words before, but they still hurt. "But," she continued, "I don't want to give up on what we had. I don't want to throw away everything we built just because of a mistake. Your mistake, but still, something we both have to face." He listened intently, his heart lifting at the sound of her words. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was hope. A chance. "I know I can't undo the past," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed the vulnerability she still carried. "But I want to see if we can rebuild. I want to see if we can move forward without constantly looking over our shoulders." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but he held back. This moment wasn't about him. It was about what she needed. "I'll do whatever it takes, Emily," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "I know I don't deserve your trust yet, but I'm willing to earn it step by step. And I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes." She looked at him then, her gaze softening. There was still a distance between them, but it was not the impenetrable wall it had been just weeks ago. It was a space they were both slowly learning to navigate. Emily sighed and leaned back against the bench, her shoulders relaxing just a little. "I don't know where this is going," she said, her voice quieter now. "But I think I'm willing to try. Slowly. Very slowly." Daniel's heart swelled with gratitude. It wasn't a promise of happily ever after, but it was a start. And for him, that was more than he had ever hoped for. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't take it for granted." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the moment settling around them. It wasn't the end of their story, but it felt like the beginning of something new. There were still so many unanswered questions, so much uncertainty. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been lost. Together. As the weeks went by, Daniel and Emily's interactions slowly began to change. There were still moments of tension, moments where the weight of their past mistakes seemed to hover in the air between them, but there were also moments of warmth, of connection. They spent time together, casually at first, talking about things they had once shared. They walked through parks, sat in quiet cafes, and occasionally, they even laughed, something that had felt so far away in the months before. Daniel had learned that trust wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. It had to be rebuilt, piece by piece, day by day. And while he was willing to wait, willing to give Emily all the time she needed, it wasn't easy. Every time he looked at her, he saw the woman he had hurt. He saw the person who had once loved him so deeply, and the person who now had to guard her heart from him. Emily was still unsure. She had told him that she was willing to try, but trying didn't mean everything was healed. She still had moments when the past crept into her thoughts, when the hurt resurfaced, but she was trying to move forward, to see if they could find a way back to each other. Daniel could feel the distance between them sometimes, the way her smile wasn't as full as it used to be, the way her eyes still held a certain sadness, but he was patient. He knew that healing took time. He wasn't expecting miracles, but each small step forward felt like a victory. It was on one of their evening walks that Emily brought up something that had been on her mind. "Do you think we can ever really get back to what we had?" she asked, her voice quiet, but the question hanging heavily between them. Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her. The question was expected, but still, it hit him with a certain weight. He had asked himself the same thing many times. Could they? Could they ever go back to the way things had been before everything fell apart? He knew the answer wasn't simple. "I don't think we can go back," he said softly, his voice tinged with a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "We can't undo what's been done, and maybe it's not about going back at all. Maybe it's about moving forward, together, with all the things we've learned." Emily nodded slowly, processing his words. "I think I'm starting to believe that too," she said after a moment. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same, but maybe we can still be something better." Daniel's heart lifted at her words, though he knew there was still a long road ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like they had a chance. Maybe it wouldn't be the same as before, but maybe, just maybe, they could build something new, something stronger. As they continued their walk, side by side, there was a quiet understanding between them. The past couldn't be erased, but they were learning to navigate it. They were learning to be there for each other in a way they hadn't been before. And for Daniel, that was enough. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But it was real. And that was all he needed right now. Emily's hand brushed his lightly, and for the first time in a long time, the gesture felt like a promise, small, fragile, but a promise nonetheless. They weren't there yet, but they were moving forward. Together.